If your partner tells you that they don't like your cooking, would you be the jerk for not comforting them after? We'll get into that in a bit, but first, am I the jerk for telling my mom I don't want to babysit my little brother anymore? I, 18-year-old female, am a senior in high school, and I feel like I've basically been my little brother's, 6-year-old male, second mom for years. My parents both work full-time, so ever since he was born, I've been expected to babysit him after school, make him dinner sometimes, help him with homework, and basically be his default caretaker whenever my parents are busy. It wasn't that bad when I was younger, but now that I'm applying for colleges, trying to keep my grades up, and just wanting a life of my own, it's becoming unbearable. The breaking point happened last weekend. My friends invited me to a concert, one of my favorite artists was in town, and I was so excited. I asked my mom if I could go, and she just assumed that I would be staying home with my brother. When I told her I already made plans, she got really upset and said, "You know we rely on you for this. You can't just abandon us last minute." I reminded her that I never agreed to babysit that day. She said, "Well, who else is going to watch him?" And when I suggested she hire a babysitter, she said we don't have money to waste on that when I'm right here. I ended up missing the concert because my mom guilt-tripped me so hard and I spent the whole night sulking while my brother played video games. The next morning, I told her I wasn't going to do this anymore. I said I love my brother, but it's not fair that I have to give up my social life because they chose to have another kid. She got quiet, then started crying, saying she and my dad are doing their best and that I'm being selfish and ungrateful. Now my dad is mad at me too, and I just feel like the worst daughter ever. I love my family, but I don't want to feel like a parent when I'm just trying to be a teenager. Am I the jerk? I would personally hope that most people who hear this story think to themselves, it's pretty obvious that OP is being parentified. In a perfect world, no kid, even an 18-year-old one, should have to feel like they have to be that extra parent for their sibling, especially when it comes at the cost of their personal life. Where it especially, in my opinion, is wrong is when it is those situations where I have X event with friends that I want to go out and experience in my life, and the kid being told, well, no, you have to watch your little brother or sister or whatnot. Obviously, depending on your economic situation, living situation, it may not always be possible, but I do think OP's not the jerk. I think they could have made something work here, they being the parents. Acrobatic Hippo 9593 commented, "Is it nice of you to help out when you can and want to? Of course. Is it your responsibility? No, absolutely not. Is it fair for your parents to guilt trip you? Heck no, that's manipulative and crappy. You're 18, you don't have to do it, you can say no. You may have to live somewhere else if they go nuclear. Do you have a grandparent, aunt, etc. you can live with until you finish school if that happens? If so, stand up for yourself. You get one life. You choose what you do from now on. Your parents chose to have a child they can't afford care for. That's on them." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy getting to decide whether or not all of these people are jerks, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is, am I the jerk for insulting my husband for what he said about our daughter's boyfriend? My daughter, 17-year-old female, recently started dating this boy, 17-year-old male. He is her first boyfriend ever. One of my biggest concerns when my daughter started dating is her getting mistreated, an obvious concern. However, after meeting her boyfriend at one of his baseball games, she met him through one of her friends in baseball, I realized this was not something I had to be seriously concerned about. He is genuinely one of the sweetest people I have ever met. Every time I see him interact with the coaches, his teammates, his opponents, my daughter, etc., it is always positive. He's just generally a very soft-spoken and kind individual, always positive and happy. I also say this with no ill intent, but he is fairly short and somewhat tubby, which is relevant to my husband's opinion. I obviously do not care about this, as he's a good person and quite clearly treats my daughter well. When my husband met him earlier, however, he did not seem as happy. Once he had left, he told me that he didn't think he was right for our daughter. He made comments about him not being man enough. I said that our daughter clearly loves him and that he clearly loves our daughter, and that I'm happy she's with someone we know is going to treat her right. My husband said that he would rather her be with a real man, not some short little gay kid. I got a little mad at this and said, what would you rather have him be then? Some big macho man that snaps at our daughter? He responded by saying that that would be better than some fat pansy. I told him he was just being an annoying Richard to the kid for no reason other than he doesn't think he's man enough for some stupid arbitrary reason, and that he should be supporting our daughter. He said if you're fine with our daughter dating a freaking pansy, so be it, I guess. He stormed off, and I've been reflecting on it and think maybe what I said was uncalled for, as he has his own perspective on these things as a dad, and I shouldn't have started throwing around insults as that does nothing to fix this issue for our daughter and her boyfriend. Does anybody else think it's actually wild that OP started questioning whether or not they're in the right here? OP is definitely the one in the right here. There was like a major toxic masculinity / major insecurity going on from the husband here. Who cares if your daughter's dating a short king or if they're not the most physically fit? People are looking for love, not the most qualified to survive an Iron Man competition. He would rather his daughter date a tall, buff, hostile man rather than somebody who's a little shorter, a little overweight, and treats their daughter like a queen. Honey, if your partner isn't the type to walk around with a ballistic vest constantly strapped to their chest, I don't know what the heck you're doing. You're not looking for protection out there. It's the loneliest life commented, so he would rather your daughter be married to a brute tough guy who treats her like crap than a shorter chubby kid who treats her well? So appearance is actually more important than character to your husband? Tell your husband you did some research and found out there is zero obligation for him to freak your daughter's boyfriend, so he can actually shove his opinion up his own butt. Not the jerk, but pay attention to how he acts and what else he has these opinions on. He doesn't think like that in a vacuum. He's gotta be a jerk in 4D. Our next story is, am I the jerk for asking a guest to not crochet at my bachelorette party? I'm 28-year-old female, getting married this year, yay, and went on my bachelorette party trip last weekend. The trip was to a cabin-type setting where we all stayed in the same house. I have 3 bridesmaids, but also invited some friends to come along. Part of the group is my brother's girlfriend, 36-year-old female, brother's 38, of 5 months who isn't in the wedding party. She wasn't initially invited because I don't know her well and they live in another state, but my brother asked me to invite her as a favor to him. He said that she's never been invited to a bachelorette and likely never would be. I have no idea why, this is just what he told me, and hoped that she could have this experience. Since people would be paying their own way and the group wasn't large, I figured why not? She seemed nice enough. The problem is that during the weekend, she would insist on crocheting all the time, even during our events and games. When I asked her to participate with us, she said that she took time off for the trip and wanted to make the most of her vacation by catching up on her crochet projects, and that playing games and hanging out with my friends wasn't fun and she didn't want to waste her days off. All her words, not mine. To be clear, I don't care that she wants to crochet in general. Most of our activities ended after dinner anyways, and we would just hang out in the living room. I just asked her to save the crocheting for at night after the activities. My issue is that she was taking her crocheting with us to places like wine tasting, brunch, a museum tour, etc. It was super disrespectful in my eyes because she would just insist on coming yet wouldn't participate in the activity. Honestly, I was bothered that she was crocheting when we were playing bridal games, but at least that was in our living room. The trip's over now, but apparently she was super peeved that I asked her to limit her crocheting time, and my brother's been pestering me to apologize to her for ruining her trip. I personally don't feel like I should, because she shouldn't have come to a bachelorette party if she didn't want to do bachelorette-y things. But I also love brother very much, and I don't want this to come between us. I'm starting to doubt myself because his girlfriend sounds really annoyed with me. Please help. I think if I were in OP's shoes, I would have some pretty strong words for the brother here. You advocated for her to come here, and then she came here and had no interest in actually doing any of these things. They just wanted to be kind of around while they crocheted the whole time. I'd also love to know how the cost allocation broke down. Because for her to go to all these places and crochet, somebody had to pay for a ticket to the wine tasting or whatnot, right? Who was the one who shelled out the money to cover for the extra guest? Rockology Adam commented, so do we maybe see why brother's girlfriend would never be invited to a bachelorette party? Not the jerk. I'm super curious about whether brother's girlfriend even wanted to go on this bachelorette weekend, or whether it might have been your brother's idea, and that answer changes how much I judge the girlfriend here. If this was your brother's idea, her a-holery is super mild. She had vacation time, this is what she wanted to do with it, your brother set this trip up so she could spend more time with you. It's unfortunate that he inserted himself here and ruined both of your weekends. If she made the suggestion herself, then she is wildly a-hole-ish. You don't need to sit around at a wine tasting doing crochet, and more importantly, no one with much sense of etiquette would. It's one thing if you're sitting around the house in those quiet evenings, yes, by all means, relax how you want. But during scheduled events, don't come on the trip if you don't want to participate in things. The worst part is that if she had done one or two things, maybe the wine tasting or the games without the crochet, and had just told you she was shy or quiet or an introvert with a limited social battery, this would have been fine. You would have cared more that she did one or the two things than that she crocheted during all of the other things. Opie responded commenting she was actually the one who wanted to come. After the invite, she did reach out and say that she was thankful that I invited her because she had never had this life experience before. But I think part of her behavior came from the trip not meeting her expectations when she got there. I didn't put this in the post because I didn't want to color people, but she made fun of all of our activities, and I overheard her on the phone with someone, I don't think it was my brother, making fun of my party and calling it a basic bench bachelorette. I didn't confront her because I didn't want to start a fight, and as the bride, I knew my friends would freak out over it. I came off as feeling like she thought she was better than me and my friends. She made quite a few comments about how we were so young and naive, and even said that she didn't think we'd all be friends in 10 years. Edit. Oh, and we also gave her the option to stay home. We didn't force her to come out with us, but she would insist on going to everything we planned, but just complained and crocheted the whole time. This next story is, would I be the jerk if I sent an email to the birthday girl's mom explaining why my daughter left the party early? My 43-year-old female daughter Annie, 9-year-old female, was invited to a party at a bowling alley to celebrate a classmate's birthday. Only girls were invited to the party, and about 21, edit, I think it might have only been 17 girls, were in attendance. We were about 5 minutes late to the party and arrived at the same time as another classmate, Betty. Due to the long lines, it took Annie and Betty about 10 minutes to get their shoes and to walk over to the lanes. The hostess had reserved 3 lanes next to each other. As typical with bowling alleys, there was 2 curved benches for seating for 4 lanes. When we arrived at the lanes, the other girls' names were programmed into the 2 lanes, and an adult male was programming his name in the 3rd lane. Annie went to the area and was directed to the 3rd lane. I said hi to a few of the other guests and saw that Annie left the area. I asked her where she was going, and she said that she was told to get a blue ball because it was lighter. I realized that the ball was 14 pounds, so I told her I'll go look for a lighter ball for her. When I came back with a ball, one of the parents asked if I was bowling, and I said that I was just getting a lighter ball for Annie. As I gave the ball to Annie, I heard the dad of one of the other girls say to Betty that her name is now on lane 2 as the birthday girl's mom, the hostess Dana, came by. I asked Dana if Annie can also be added to lane 1 or 2, and was told that Annie is in lane 3. I was surprised and walked over to lane 3 to see that Annie was added to lane 3, and the only player on lane 3 Annie was playing with was the adult male who we didn't know, with a bunch of other players named Kid 1, Kid 2, and Kid 3. I then saw Annie sitting by herself. I asked her if she wanted to go to the other bench to join her friends, but she said she was on lane 3 and was waiting her turn to bowl, though the adult male was bowling for the other kids. I let her be and went back to talk to some of the parents, but 5 minutes later realized she was still sitting alone on the bench rather than joining her classmates on the other bench for lane 1 and 2. I walked over and asked her again why she didn't join the other classmates, and she said that she felt left out. So I asked her if she wanted to go. She said she did because she didn't want to play with the adult male stranger, so Annie and I walked out. As we went out the door, her friends asked her why she was leaving, and she said she didn't want to bowl with the male stranger. The other parents asked me why we were leaving, and I said that Annie was playing on a separate lane by herself. A few parents offered to have them take turns in lanes 1 and 2, but by that time, Annie had walked out. I then took her for ice cream. After we left, I realized I could have asked Dana to divide the girls evenly into 3 lanes, but by that, we had already left. I'm really upset how the hostess thought it was okay to isolate Annie, and I'm glad I didn't just drop her off and leave. Would I be the jerk if I sent the hostess an email explaining why we left early and how the setup was exclusionary, and that it was improper to have my daughter bowl with an adult male stranger instead of her classmates? So I definitely understand if there's like a limit to how many people can bowl on 1 lane, that it's going to take some juggling to figure out, but you don't exclude one of the kids and kick them off to the side to bowl with some random person who's just there to unwind, especially when that chalks up to your 8-year-old daughter just bowling with some adult male stranger. You don't gotta be Raven Simone to be able to see that that kid is going to look over at those other lanes, see all the kids bunched up on those 2 lanes having an absolute blast, and then look back to their lane just to see this random adult guy bowling 4 frames in a row himself. Yippee. Trevina Ice commented, "Not the jerk, but you should have asked. Why is there a stranger bowling on the reserved lines?" And yes, you should have asked Dana to divide the girls to 3 lines, but it doesn't help now to send an angry email, it'll only backfire. Dana had much to do with 21 kids there. Yes, it was bad that Annie was put on the last lane, but I think no one was thinking that far. Children have the first come first served mentality and all wanted to be on the lines with the friends. And Dana had to do with all of the other stuff, so I think she'll just be angry at an email and it could backfire to Annie and her friendship to the classmate. Our next story is, am I the jerk for shaming my kid sister into cleaning her room? I, 21-year-old female, live with my 2 kids, while my sister, 11-year-old female, lives with our mom in the same town. Mom rarely asks for help and tends to handle things on her own. However, my sister is very manipulative, constantly blaming mom, saying she doesn't care and ruins her life. Recently, she screamed at mom for not washing her school uniform, despite having a pile of clean clothes, including her uniform, in her room for over a week. She also trashed her room. Dirty underwear, clutter, food packets, moldy dishes, no sheets on her bed, and no clear path through the mess. She takes food upstairs despite not being allowed and refuses to clean even when mom helps. She even yells when mom tries to clean it for her, insisting, "I like it like that." Mom has tried everything, cleaning with her, guiding her, letting the mess build up, even cleaning it herself. Nothing works. When I casually joked, "Let me stay with her for a day and bully her into cleaning," mom shocked me by seriously agreeing, which showed how desperate she was. So we swapped houses for a day. With mom's full permission, I went full mean girl. I took my sister's TV, phone, tablet, and laptop and told her, "If you're gonna live like a wild dog, might as well put you in a cage. Mom gives you everything and this is how you repay her? Your 4-year-old nephew keeps his room cleaner than this. Maybe we should send a picture to your school friends." She huffed, puffed, stomped, cried, but ultimately cleaned her room, proving she could do it. When mom came back, she was nearly in tears with relief and hasn't stopped thanking me. My sister now hates me, but if it makes mom's life easier, I can live with that. Most of our family understood why I did it, but my grandmother and aunt are mad, saying I should be the cool older sister she looks up to, not the one who breaks her down. But as a parent myself, I feel for mom more than I do for my sister. Am I the jerk? I feel like there's potentially a lot to be said and argued by a lot of people about the mom's parenting styles and the fact that the kid kind of seems unpunished, and by extension of that, allowing these behaviors to continue. That said, if I found myself in a similar situation to OP, I feel like I agree with them that I would rather be that bully of an older sibling and allow my mom to preserve that relationship with their kid rather than pushing the mom to be that authoritarian person and probably ruining what relationship there is. Because I'm imagining a kid like that, they're going to be resentful of anybody who actually makes them clean up after themselves and checks their bad behavior. Mysterious Elk6248 commented, "Not the jerk, but does mom take her things until she can behave without caving to sister's tantrums? Because it's going to be an ongoing problem unless mom can set and enforce these rules. She doesn't have to say anything except that those things are available to her once she can meet the expectations outlined for her. Because I hate to say it, if mom caves, that's enabling because it teaches sister that if she throws a fit long enough, she will get her way, no consequences. And you don't need to regularly become your sister's bully because mom can't enforce consequences. Tread cautiously." OP responded commenting, "Mom definitely raised me harsher than she does my sister. Sometimes it's just best to pick your battles," is the mentality she has with my sister, but when I was younger, it was, if anything is still on the floor in X amount of time, it's all going in the trash. So it's definitely rubbed off on me. I was once messy, but when I got embarrassed by people seeing it, I changed my way of living, so my thoughts were that it could work on her. This is the first time mom has let me step in, but I wouldn't want to make a habit of it as again, she is her mom, I'm not, and it's not my place. I do think mom could be a bit more solid with her consequences though. This next story is, am I the jerk for not comforting my boyfriend after he didn't like my cooking? Earlier in the day, I told my boyfriend that I was going to make mapo tofu, a dish he's never had before. It's one that I like a lot. He told me he's never had tofu before, so I was excited for him to try it. Since we have different cultures and different taste, I told him ahead of time that if he didn't end up liking it, he can order out. Not that it matters much, but he's white and I'm Asian. When I was making the food, he comes into the kitchen and tells me, "Taco Bell seems nice right now." To which I tell him that I want him to at least eat some of the food I'm making. When I actually made the food, he seemed sure that he wasn't gonna like it, as he told me, "I'll just try a bit of your bowl." And I responded, "Why don't you just get a bowl for yourself?" He responds with, "I don't really eat tofu." I was confused because I thought he told me he's never tried it before. When he took a bite, he said, "It's good, I just don't like the texture of tofu." So I ate my bowl by myself while he prepared the dog's food. When I'm about to clean up, he asks me, "Are you mad I didn't like it?" I said, "No, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. I made this for us." He said, "At least I tried it. You're making me feel bad." "Fine, I'll just eat it." I was thrown aback because I don't want him to feel forced to eat something he doesn't like, so I responded with, "No, it's fine, you can get Taco Bell. I'll just pack this for my sister and I's lunch." He then said, "I'll just eat it, you're making me feel guilty," to which I just shrugged. We then got into a long argument with him saying that he expected me to comfort him when he expressed himself feeling guilty after the way I acted / my tone of voice. He said he felt like I was guilt-tripping him. I felt like I'm not responsible for him feeling that way, just the same way I don't blame him for me feeling disappointed. I just don't know what more there was to say. I told him he's free to get takeout and that I wasn't mad at him for not liking my dish. Maybe I did have a bad tone, but it might be because I was disappointed. Please help me because I have no idea if I was in the wrong or not. Edit, you all provided me a lot of perspectives, mainly saying I'm not in the wrong, but I made sure to take into consideration the "everybody sucks here" comments as well as the "you're the jerk" ones, despite there not being many of them. More context I mentioned in the comments: I'm 22 and he's 26, no he's not a child. I would have not made the dish if I knew he didn't like tofu. Same way I don't cook him dishes that include fish since he dislikes it. He said some other disrespectful comments like, "Alright, let me try this mama tofu or mabu tofu" before trying it. He was joking, but this could have also affected my mood and I didn't realize it. So after a couple of hours after our argument, my boyfriend asks me where I put the leftover mapo tofu and if he can eat it. He didn't say it in a rude or dreading way, but polite and positive manner. I assured him that he doesn't need to eat it because I know he doesn't like it. But he clarified that he likes the flavor, just not as much as the texture, and that he wants to eat it. He continues to eat while playing on his PC and only finished about half of his bowl before storing the rest. I can tell he really tried to eat it either because he didn't want it to go to waste or to please me. After a while, I ended up going to him and apologizing for not taking his feelings into consideration and explained that I wasn't trying to make him feel guilty. Maybe I was being outwardly dreading. I know a lot of you agreed that I wasn't responsible for how he felt and that it's up to him to regulate his emotions. I still fully agree with this, but also recognize that this is a partnership, and that although I'm not responsible for his feelings, I need to at least recognize them if I want this to work out. He smiled and gave me a hug. He also apologized for reacting the way he did, raising his voice, and escalating the argument. I know a lot of you were telling me to dump him, even some suspecting I'm in an abusive relationship and sending me books related to abusive relationships. I do not blame you at all, since I shared a small glance of my relationship in a bad moment. It was not reflective of its entirety. Yeah, he can be immature and manipulate sometimes, but he's a good partner, and most of the time tries to communicate and solve our issues. I thank you all for your concerns, but I'm very aware of moments where he's being irrational or trying to manipulate me, and I usually call him out or choose not to take his attempts to divert the situation when he is at fault. I am fully capable of standing up for myself when I need to. I also acknowledge that this is only my perspective, which is only half of the situation. I am biased. Thank you all for caring. So honestly, I do think this is a situation where the boyfriend felt bad about not necessarily loving the food, maybe not being able to outwardly gush over it or whatnot, and started acting out in a weird way to try to get an assurance from OP that it's okay they feel that way. Like the, "I feel guilty, I'm sorry." All he wants to hear is, "It's okay, baby girl, you hate that tofu, I don't mind." New Grapefruit 1737 commented, "Not the jerk. I like Taco Bell as much as the next guy, but for a dude to skip mapo tofu that his girlfriend made at home and want Taco Bell instead is really sucky. Shows poor taste, immaturity, and a lack of appreciation. And how can he have a problem with the texture of tofu, but not the texture of Taco Bell slop?" Our next story is, am I the jerk for demanding that my fiance's parents change their plans to have a vacation at the same place as our honeymoon? My fiance and I have our wedding coming up in April. We had brainstormed for a while on where best to spend our honeymoon. We went over the more popular and well-known places, but then landed on a more offbeat destination that I felt would truly be a great place for us to start our life as a married couple. I've been looking forward to it just being the two of us. I know he has a really hectic work schedule, and we were going to make the most out of this. A couple of days ago, he told me that his parents had been impressed by how hyped I was about it, and were planning on going there for a vacation too, largely overlapping with our dates. They're staying at the same hotel as us. I was livid. They can go any other time, why now? He said he had suggested that, but his mom said that they had taken time off for the wedding too, and it worked well into their plans. Also, that since we were going to be going back, it'll allow them to maybe see us a few times before we leave. I was almost in tears. I was so angry. He tried to reassure me, saying that they had promised it'll be two separate things and they won't be inserting themselves on our honeymoon. They want us to enjoy it and they'd be doing their own thing. I want to believe it, but I know his mom. I like her as a soon-to-be mother-in-law, but she can be very clingy and routinely laments how far he, and now us, are from them, so I just have a feeling the two plans are not going to be as independent as he thinks they'll be. I vented about it to my parents too. My mom agreed with me that this isn't right. My dad's more on the fence about it. He doesn't think everything is ruined. I've demanded my fiance make them change their plans. He says he asked them to. They promised to do their own thing. What can he do? Tell them that he doesn't believe them and call them liars? I messed up here and said, if that's what it takes. He got quiet. I realized this was too much and sincerely apologized for crossing this line. This has been eating me up. I was envisioning a certain type of honeymoon, and this happened. Am I the jerk? I don't think OP's the jerk. I mean, let's be real. Imagine what most couples do or expect out of their honeymoon. Now imagine doing that while knowing in the back of your head that your parents are just in the same hotel not too far away. I mean, imagine at your honeymoon you want to lounge out at the beach together as a freshly married couple, and you have to worry about whether or not mom and dad are going to stroll right around the corner and saddle up next to you. Nobody wants that. OP then went on to post an update. Am I the jerk for demanding that my fiance's parents change their plan to have a vacation at the same place as our honeymoon? Hi, thank you for the advice in the original post. I thought over this more. I was heartened by the response here because I thought I was the one being over the top about this, but I saw that most people agreed that what they're doing isn't right. I really didn't want to change plans, so I plan to talk to him again, speaking respectfully about his parents, but firm. Because last time I'd gone over the line a bit, which had derailed our conversation. We met yesterday after work. I raised the issue with him again. I said that he knows how much I'd be looking forward to our honeymoon. I only plan on having it once, and his parents being there will ruin it for both of us. I also said that I don't want to change anything about it, not the hotel or the destination. It just wasn't fair. He said that he doesn't like that they're coming either, but they're giving their word to not interfere. But to me, it's not about believing them, just that the honeymoon that I had in mind is going to get ruined with them around. I told him that this wasn't a trivial annoyance for me. This was actually making me unhappy and I need him to do something about it. He said he'll handle it. Well, first he told me that knowing his parents, especially his mom, she's going to feel slighted by us. We're going to be living a 3-hour flight away from them, so it's not like we're going to see them too often. But he said he just wanted me to know that that was going to happen. I said I'm fine with that. Probably could have been more tactful, but he found it amusing. He said he'll handle it, so I waited. Last night, he told me his parents were canceling their plan. I asked him how it went. He said it went fine. They said it would be 2 separate plans, but he told them their plan was becoming a problem and asked them to change their plan. It would mean a lot to him, so they did. They hadn't booked tickets yet, but they're either looking into getting a refund on their hotel reservations, or my fiance suggested delaying it to sometime later in the future. I told him I was sorry that he'd been put in this position, but I was so happy about it. I started tearing up too. This had just been bearing on me so heavily, and I was so glad it was back to the way I have it in my mind. Also, I know the stress of wedding and work has been bearing on him too, and I didn't like adding this extra stress onto him either. He said it was a very short and simple convo with his parents. I thought there would be a big argument because they hadn't been swayed previously. My parents were also really happy for me. My dad thinks it wouldn't hurt to call my mother-in-law and just apologize for what happened. Not in a "I'm sorry I did this" way, but more of a "I'm sorry this happened" way. My mom thinks there's no need. My fiance thinks it's up to me. I'm really glad I came here and found out I wasn't overreacting, or I wouldn't have had the confidence to ask for my honeymoon back. Thank you. That's an interesting proposition, whether or not calling the mother-in-law and trying to hash it out. It might be a good thing if the mother-in-law is the type of person that can communicate on that level. The stuff OP said about her earlier, I feel like kind of indicates it's not really going to be productive, but maybe it's worth a shot. Our next story is, am I the jerk for not making any efforts to get my kids to like my mother's boyfriend? My 36-year-old male father passed away when I was 20, and my mother didn't cope well. She got better with time, but she didn't attempt to pursue another relationship until 15 years later. She's been dating Jim for 2 years. I don't hate Jim, but I don't like him either. He drinks a lot, my mother's had to cancel on us several times because he was drunk, has made several offensive jokes to my brother, 43-year-old male, that I didn't appreciate, and is overall a pretty unpleasant person to be around. Still, he seems to genuinely love my mother and makes her happy, so my brother and I don't interfere. One problem I do have with the relationship is that my mother has been trying to get my children, 9-year-old male and 5-year-old female, to form a grandparent bond with Jim. He's also been trying to take on a grandfather role, which neither me nor my wife, 34-year-old female, want for the kids. They don't try to push boundaries too much, but we've had some minor arguments in the past. Anyway, my daughter had her first ever dance recital last December. There was a limit of 4 guests per child. The kids usually ask us to invite one of their grandparents to events like this, but my mother was out of town. I didn't even ask her, and my in-laws were busy. Instead, my daughter invited my brother to join me, my wife, and our son. My mother and Jim came to visit us during the weekend, and she saw pictures from the recital for the first time in a photo album. She asked why my brother was there and not her, and I reminded her that she was traveling at the time. She said, well, Jim was in town. I'll be honest, we didn't even think of inviting Jim back in December, and neither did my kids. I told my mother that it was my daughter who chose to invite her uncle, and we respected that. Then Jim turned around to my daughter and told her that she could invite him next time Grandma wasn't around. My wife chimed in and said she could invite whoever she wanted. After they left, my mother called me. She said she was upset that we weren't making any efforts to welcome Jim into the family, and we were depriving our children of a wonderful grandfather. I told her that we would never force our children to like him or spend time with him if they didn't want to, and that wasn't up for discussion. We ended up having an argument over this before I hung up on her. I spoke with a few family members yesterday who think I'm being too harsh on Jim. So, am I the jerk? I think OP's mom's request in a vacuum is reasonable enough. Hey, I've been dating this guy for 2 years. It's fairly serious. It would be nice if he's integrated and welcomed more into the family. The problem is OP said that this guy isn't that nice of a person to be around. Drinks a lot, is unpleasant to be around, made several offensive jokes. I mean, at that point, OP has to be a parent and realize that this probably isn't a good role model to even have around your kids. Let alone the simple fact that back in December, the kid alone didn't care nor think to invite them. Imaginary College 38 commented, "Not the jerk. I hate when adults try to force kids into having any sort of relationship with other adults. Leave the kids alone. This is how you foster resentful feelings in children and teach them that their feelings and decisions don't matter." OP responded commenting, "My wife had similar problems with some of her family members growing up, so we try to be extra mindful of that. We teach the kids to be kind regardless, but also that they can choose whether they want to be close to someone or not." Our next story is, am I the jerk for refusing to go to my sister's wedding after finding out only our side of the family were having to pay to attend? So my younger sister, Katie, 28-year-old female, and her partner, Chris, 29-year-old male, are getting married in April in Dubai. She has always wanted an extravagant wedding and is going all out on this. So the wedding is happening over 4 days. There's 70 guests, but they want us, me, my husband, and parents to stay in the same hotel with them, along with their bridesmaids, which I'm maid of honor, and groomsmen. The hotel is pretty luxe, so with flights it's costing us just over 2,900 British pounds each. Chris's family are also staying in the hotel, which includes his parents, 2 brothers, and his nephew. They are well off. I don't know exactly how much they earn combined, but I know Katie is on $88,000 and she's the lower earner. But about 6 months ago, Chris and Katie came to us and asked to borrow $17,000 more. They stressed it would be a loan paid over time and said the venue had increased in price, Dubai laws were different, blah blah blah. They paid this money or they lost the lot. We believed them and I offered a loan $7,000 and my parents the other $10,000. So long story short, I've since found out through someone else that the $17,000 wasn't for the venue. It was for Chris's family to fly over there. They saw how much it was going to be, didn't want to pay, and refused to go. I asked Katie and she confirmed, so my first question was if they were paying for his parents, why not pay for ours? I would never expect them to pay for me. Even if we couldn't afford it, I'd have wished them well and stayed at home. And her answer was, because they can afford it. She got very defensive and said this was the fairest way she could think of doing it. It's hard enough planning a wedding, etc. But when I asked if you genuinely thought this was the fairest way to do it, why did you lie about what the $17,000 was for and say it was a venue issue? She couldn't answer. My parents are aware and are very disappointed they lied, but have said they're still attending, but I've backed out. To me, it feels like my parents are being taken advantage of, and if they couldn't afford to pay for both our and Chris's parents and his brothers and nephews, then they shouldn't have just paid for the 4 parents or no one at all. And they especially shouldn't have lied about it. Katie and Chris keep calling and asking me to attend, saying I'm making them feel bad and ruining their day, but the whole thing just feels icky to me. I'm genuinely an open book, so be brutal. Am I being the jerk here? Should I just suck it up and go? In my books, OP's not the jerk. It would honestly, I think, be one thing if they were just upfront and honest and said, listen, can you help us out with a loan that we'll pay back to help us get these other people here who otherwise will not come? If that was the case, at least they would be honest about it, and also it is a loan. So like, in theory, you know they're good earners, so they're probably good for it. The problem here is they lied about it so horrendously that this whole thing has an unbelievable stench that is never going to be rebottled. Constitutional History commented, not the jerk. Yet one of the many reasons I dislike destination weddings, they're the penultimate egocentric events. OP responded commenting, I totally get this. We had a destination wedding in Italy as well, to be honest. However, before we booked it, we did rough price checks in terms of how much it would cost everyone before we booked. It actually ended up being cheaper than a lot of places in the UK, but also made a list of who or what we could afford to pay for and who our non-negotiable were in terms of if there were certain people who wouldn't make it or afford it, and then we would just book somewhere in the UK. It worked out in the end. We had 15 people and we paid for everyone's hotel room, and the flights were about £240 each. So we counted that as everyone's gift to us, as we figured after travel, gifts, etc., it probably wasn't far off what people would pay to attend a local wedding. But I didn't expect Katie to do the same, as I knew she was having 70 people, and at the end of the day, it's her wedding. Our next story is, am I the jerk for calling out my foster carer in front of my social worker? I, 17-year-old female, have lived in my current foster home for a little over a year. I immediately got bad vibes on the foster carer on the first day. I don't know, she just gave me off energy though that could have just been me being judgmental. There's another girl who's been living in the same foster home for about 5 to 6 years before me. She's also 17, and for the sake of the story, I'll call her May. We became friends, and she told me that before I came, that Jane, the foster carer, had showed her my personal file and asked for her opinion about me. Since then, Jane has been chatting the most crap about me to May. She tells me everything. Jane calls me rude, says I'm a bad influence, that I'm disrespectful, lazy, and have no manners, and apparently act like this is my house. Jane likes to rave and brag about how good of a foster carer she is and how long she's been in the company. She does a lot of things to make herself look good in front of the social workers. About a week ago, my social worker came over to help me with a housing application since I wasn't allowed to stay after 18 because Jane wouldn't get money to take care of me. Jane said those exact words to May, by the way. During the meeting, my social worker said something that completely set me off. I had to go at Jane saying that she's a useless foster carer and that she doesn't do anything and that she doesn't care. A week before the meeting, I was really ill with a chest infection, and not once did Jane ask if I was okay. Her daughter made me food and tea for the entire week, while Jane said literally nothing to me. After about 4 days, Jane asked if I wanted cough medicine, and I said no. She never asked how I was doing. I brought this up during the meeting and told my social worker how Jane never asked how I was doing when I was ill. Jane immediately got defensive and went into the other room. She got the medicine just to prove a point that she had bought medicine for me. I also brought up how she actively chats crap about me in the house. I never said where I got the source from. I just said that I could hear from upstairs. She called me a liar and swore to God that she would never do that. I also made a point that on my birthday, she didn't say happy birthday to me until later on in the day. She didn't get me a card, she didn't get me a gift, she didn't get me a cake. I also said that when it was May's birthday, everyone went out to Nando's while I didn't get anything. No one asked if I wanted to go out for my birthday, to which Jane responded, "Oh, do you want to go out this weekend?" I said no because it defeated the whole purpose and it also proved that she was trying to put on a show in front of the social workers. After my social worker left, we had a conversation and sorted things out. As I was going back to my room, I heard her on the phone to my social worker telling her everything that we had just spoken about, furthermore proving my point that she's only in it to make herself look good. First of all, I gotta admit I don't have much personal knowledge or experience in this kind of thing, but I gotta say I'm willing to believe OP wholeheartedly that it does really much seem like she's just in it to try to get extra money out of foster caring. Like, I don't think it's necessarily an all-out evil thing to use foster caring as a way to keep yourself going and afloat, but that can't be the only reason you're doing it. And I'm not saying that in a way that's assuming she has greater intentions as far as foster caring goes. I'm saying that anybody that is in foster caring only for the money is kind of the scum of the earth. Curious Vixen here commented, "I've never dealt with a foster care system, so this is just an outside perspective and maybe useless. I'd say not the jerk. The caseworker needs to know this information, not just to make sure you're receiving proper care, but when considering future placements. I also think it's good that you said everything with Jane present, so she can't claim you were talking behind her back. I hope she lives up to her end of the discussion in the months you're still there, and I hope you have a wonderful, successful life when you get out on your own." Robin Music commented, "I was fostered from the age of 3 until I was adopted later. My parents set unbelievable high standards, and I felt like I was always never good enough. Despite distinctions in 12 music exams and winning nearly every competition I entered, it wasn't good enough. I went off the rails and dropped out of school. I had to catch up later in life, but I ended up with 2 degrees. My self-esteem was shot to pieces, but I met a super guy and got married, and now I have a 21-year-old son, and I'm happy and confident. Don't let your foster mother put you down. The world is out there, and you can do anything you want. I hope you go on to have a wonderful life. Don't let negative people drag you down." This next story is, "Am I the jerk for telling my sister and brother-in-law it's their fault their son doesn't speak to them? I, 53-year-old female, have a sister, 55-year-old female, I'll call her Carolyn. She's been married for 30 years to her husband Richard, 58-year-old male. When they married in the 90s, they planned to have children. However, nature had other plans with them, and my brother-in-law couldn't have children. The doctors confirmed the impossibility, and this devastated them. After weighing their options, they chose to go through infertility treatments with donor sperm. I also must note that my sister is a controlling person, and my brother-in-law thinks he knows everything. Fast forward a few years, and my sister and brother-in-law had 2 sons through this process, both of whom have different donators. And as science grows with DNA, I advised my sister to tell the children when they were young of how they came to be, and just be honest with them. I was met with harsh backlash, telling me to mind my own business and that under no circumstances are her sons to find out. I would continually bring it up on occasion until one nasty fight where my brother-in-law told me I was an uneducated idiot who knew nothing about this subject. Then I gave up and never spoke to them about it again. Last year, Carolyn's older son decided to take a 23andMe test and discovered that my brother-in-law is not his biological father. This caused a massive uproar in my sister's family. My nephew told them that he always knew something was wrong and wanted to find the truth. After months of back and forth fighting about my sister and brother-in-law's betrayal of trust, per my nephew, he has now cut contact with his parents. I'm connected with him through social media and will not do anything to risk losing this contact. Last week, my sister called me sobbing because the birthday presents she sent to her son were returned with a note that said, "Do not contact me again," from my nephew. After listening to her for 30 minutes, I got tired. I tried to hang up, but she lashed out and asked why I wasn't supporting her. I told her the truth, that she ignored my thoughts for years. I told her I warned her that science was catching up with her lies, and she should have told the kids when they were young so they could process it better. She called me heartless and a monster for not giving her help or trying to persuade my nephew to speak with her. I told her that I would not do this for either her or brother-in-law, that this situation is their fault and that they need to figure out how to live with the consequences or find a way to fix the relationship with their son. It was then my brother-in-law got on the phone and called me a bench and hung up on me. My mother and father got involved and told me that a good sister wouldn't want this type of family tension to continue and that I needed to step up and help my sister and her son to speak to each other. I refused because I won't risk my one connection I still have with my nephew. So am I the jerk for not helping my sister and brother-in-law fix their relationship with my nephew and telling them it's their fault? So personally, I say, hey, look, if they didn't want to tell their kid, that's on them. That was completely their decision they made, fair enough. When their kid finds out on their own and they're upset and they feel like they've been lied to their whole life and their identity isn't what it was or was purported to be, it's not really much of a surprise that there's going to be this fallout. I don't see how OP, the one person who was out here consistently being like, you should be honest with your kid, is now somehow the responsible one to try to patch things back together. Curious TikTok commented, not the jerk. They insisted on not listening to you, punished you enough that you shut up, and now they want you to nuke your relationship with your nephew in an attempt to fix the issue. Plus, that seems unlikely to work. You value your relationship with your nephew and don't want to risk it. Actions have consequences, and you are thinking ahead again. Our next story is, am I the jerk for not letting my daughter help my niece bake? So I, 23-year-old female, have a 4-year-old daughter, Mia, and a 14-year-old niece, Sophie. Sophie and her parents live a few minutes away, so she visits pretty often. Sophie likes to bake, sometimes for fun and sometimes to sell. We let her come over while the house is empty so she can have a clear and quiet place to bake. This time though, she was on short notice to make cupcakes for her friend's sister's birthday, so we were all home this time. My toddler Mia loves to help me in the kitchen whenever I cook, and she got very excited when she saw Sophie in there, baking alone. Mia kept asking if she could help, and I told her, not this time, sweetheart, I need to let Sophie do this herself. She was disappointed, but I thought it was important for Sophie to feel independent, and frankly, I didn't think Mia was old enough to safely handle baking on her own. It can be messy, and I didn't want to have to clean it. Well, my fiance came home shortly after and immediately saw Mia's meltdown. He asked me why I didn't let Mia help, and I explained my reasoning. Sophie is older, more capable of managing in the kitchen without needing supervision, and she wasn't baking only for fun, she was taking them to a party and needed to get this done quickly. My fiance was really upset with me, saying that Sophie should let Mia help, and she should do this because we're always letting her use our kitchen and that Mia never helps, so it's not like we're constantly asking her to let Mia bake and she can sacrifice this one time. I don't think that's fair to Sophie. She's a baker, not a babysitter. But now he's sulking and says I'm being unfair to Mia by not letting her participate. Am I wrong to not let her help? Edit, I forgot to add, Sophie prefers to bake by herself. That's why she comes over when the house is empty. OP's not the jerk here, especially considering the extra context that she prefers to bake by herself. She's coming over kind of with this mutual agreement understanding that I'm offering my kitchen for you to use and not get in your way. It's a very sweet thing to do for your 14-year-old niece, and to be honest, there's a lot of things sort of similar to that where they're kind of working on their craft or doing their own thing, where if your toddler wants to be involved or mess with things, I'm trying to put this nicely, you should be cognizant enough to know that your toddler can probably just be very annoying or destructive. Basically the very opposite of adding productivity to whatever it is they're trying to get done. Basically, it was never Sophie's intention to have a play date while trying to make these cupcakes last minute. Worth Season 3645 commented, not the jerk, oh my god. If your fiance wants your child to bake, then he can bake something with her. You do not have to give a child everything that they want. Your fiance is setting your child up for future disappointment and to be entitled. Your daughter will survive not baking with your niece. You did the right thing. Our next story is, am I the jerk for not involving myself with my in-laws' baby loss 3 years running? My sister-in-law had a stillbirth 3 years ago. We were so saddened and offered support. She has 3 living children before this. At Christmas, before the 1-year anniversary, she opened our Christmas card. A few moments later, she then picked it back up, stated that she couldn't display it unless her baby's name was included, and proceeded to write their name in the card. I tried to put it to the back of my mind, but honestly felt she could have taken the card home and wrote their name to save making me the example in front of the entire family. We attended the first 2 memorials and found them very difficult and awkward. My sibling was stillborn, and I grew up in a household that didn't talk about it. Whenever my siblings and I tried to ask questions about our stillborn sibling, our mother would shut us down. During family gatherings, she makes excessive comments and social media posts that nothing feels right without her angel baby being there. My other sister-in-law and I find it upsetting that she makes these comments, as we cannot help that our children survived and one of hers didn't. She has 3 other healthy children to care for. During a family gathering, she made a comment that her living children recently asked her who her favorite was, and that she had responded that her angel baby was her favorite. The room went silent. As a child who was repeatedly told with much venom that I wouldn't have been born had my sibling survived, that broke me. So anniversary 3 rolled around recently. Again, we were asked to attend a memorial. Although this time she called it a birthday, which struck me as odd, but we felt it was too much for us to go through again after attending the first 2. We decided not to go, but I chose to light a candle and wore my angel wings brooch for the week before and week after the passing date as a tribute. We've now received a message from mother-in-law to state my sister-in-law is very upset with us all as we didn't make the effort and we should apologize. Whilst I appreciate that she's still grieving, she's able to do that in her own way, and if others chose to grieve differently, then that's okay too. I don't believe you can dictate to others how to grieve, nor can you have a monopoly on grief. Everyone is different, and I respect that she wants to do a grand gesture each year, but she needs to accept that not everyone wants to or feels comfortable being a part of it. I feel like it's not my direct loss to carry on grieving so openly. Yes, I feel sad as it's a loss of life, but at what point do we stop mentioning it all the time? Look, I'm with OP. I don't want to squash the in-laws grieving. If they want to have this grand gesture or whatnot, sure. But it's definitely not fair to expect other people, especially slightly extended family, to continue carrying on grieving over this baby 3 years down the line. Like, just to be brutally honest, after a year or 2 removed, how much would you actually care about this beyond the initial sadness when you are reminded or remember? I mean, at some point, things need to move on, right? Me Not at Work commented, "Not the jerk. Your sister-in-law needs some serious help. The loss of a child in this way is extremely sad, I know firsthand, and grieving is part of that. But 3 years? That's not healthy and is clearly damaging her other children and probably her marriage. The rest of her family either doesn't see this as a problem, and they need help too, or is simply enabling her problem by going along to avoid dealing with it, but everyone needs to sit your sister-in-law down and get her to seek the help she clearly needs." Our next story is, am I the jerk for telling my mother-in-law to pee off after she criticized me for not going to the gym while pregnant? I, 28-year-old female, am currently pregnant and I've been staying active by going to the gym, as my doctor assured me it's perfectly safe. I don't do anything extreme, just light weights, walking, and stretching to stay healthy for myself and the baby. My mother-in-law, she's been making constant comments about how I'm selfish and putting my baby in danger by working out. She even told me I'm asking for a miscarriage by not just sitting at home and acting like a proper pregnant woman. I've tried explaining that my doctor is on board, but she won't listen. Today, she pushed it too far, saying that I was going to regret it when something happens. I snapped and told her to pee off and stop sticking her nose in my business. Now she's playing the victim, saying I was disrespectful and that I should apologize. My husband is on my side, but thinks I could have handled it more calmly. Am I the jerk for snapping at her? OP cleared it with their doctor. They know what they're doing. OP's not the jerk for going there and trying to stay active. Honestly, I have a lot of respect for OP because I feel like if I were in OP's position, I probably would be the one just sitting around all day at home, acting like a proper pregnant woman. Firefly232 commented, I have one of those household maintenance cookbooks and life guides for women. It's published in the 1960s. It has a section on pregnancy and says that light housework, asterisk, is okay and also gives exercises to do daily to keep healthy. Bearing in mind that housework then would be a lot more physical than today. Not the jerk, your mother-in-law is a pain in the butt, but you have a husband problem and you need to get him on side ASAP. Our next story is, am I the jerk for admitting to my son that I love his mother more than him and telling him he's acting self-centered? My son moved out right after graduating college last year. Since then, he's been very preoccupied with his own life. My wife and I couldn't be prouder of him, but we do wish he made a little more effort to keep in touch, especially since he only lives 30 minutes away. Months would go by without hearing from him, and we were always the ones to reach out first. We never complained about it to him until my wife's birthday. Her birthday was 2 days ago and we didn't get a call or a surprise visit. She was a little upset but chose not to confront him. I decided to call him about it, not out of anger, just as a reminder. I said, "Hey buddy, you missed your mom's birthday." He immediately apologized and asked me to wish her a happy birthday on his behalf. I told him it would be nice if he could visit us soon because we miss him. Apparently that set him off. He told me that he has his own life to live and that we have ours. I told him I understood, but we're still his parents and want to stay close. That's when he bluntly said that he doesn't want a close relationship with us and that he's frustrated we won't leave him alone. I asked him why, and out of nowhere he brought up something from when he was 10 years old. He said he overheard my wife and me saying that we love each other more than we love him. I was completely confused because I don't recall ever saying anything like that. When I asked for more context, he said that we had been talking about our own parents' marriages, and at some point I said something along the lines of, even though I love him a lot, I love his mother the most. My wife apparently agreed with me, and that conversation has tainted his view of our relationship ever since. I told him there was nothing wrong with what I said and that he was acting like a self-centered brat who thinks the world revolves around him. He told me to go to heck. When I told my wife about what happened, she said I was wrong for calling him that, even though I believed it was true. OP did go on to post an update, but I want to jump in real quick just to say, personally, I don't think there's actually anything wrong necessarily with what he said there. By that, I'm clarifying that he loves his wife the most. But the biggest issue is the dad's reaction after getting called out about this, and probably more things that's gone on in the relationship between them that just isn't possible to be gleaned from this Reddit post. So OP went on to post an update. Am I the jerk for admitting to my son that I love his mother more than him and telling him he's acting self-centered? This morning, I had a deeply informative and somewhat emotional conversation with my son. I apologized to him about what I called him and let him speak first, allowing him to get things off his chest. He started by apologizing for forgetting my wife's birthday. He explained that he had been preoccupied with issues in his relationship over the past year, which is one of the reasons he had been distant from us. I asked him why he hadn't come to us for support. He said he didn't want to burden us with his problems. I also asked if he resented us in any way. That's when he opened up about his feelings in more detail. He reassured me that we weren't bad parents. He admitted that we never neglected him, that we loved him, and that we were attentive. He also acknowledged that, in the end, it was okay that we prioritized each other over him. I told him I was happy that he could understand our perspective. I reiterated what many people say, that children eventually leave the house, while a spouse stays. My son said that while it was okay for us to have put each other first, it was unfair for us to expect a close relationship with him now, to the point where we would want frequent visits and calls. If parenting was just a temporary phase in our lives, then we should be grateful for whatever little attention he chooses to give us. He explained how his feelings had built up over time, affected by small things we did, even if we hadn't realized it. He brought up things that he had noticed growing up, particularly after overhearing our conversations. He mentioned how we would always greet each other first when coming home from work, even though he was physically closer to us. He also said that he felt like he didn't get enough individual time with either of us, though he had attributed it to our busy schedules. Then, he shared his own perspective on parenting. He told me that when he starts his own family, he would strive to prioritize both his children and his spouse equally. I told him that, in practice, that approach wouldn't work, since children eventually move out and start their own families. But he responded by saying that he wouldn't expect his hypothetical child to place him on equal footing with the new family they create. In his view, being a parent is a choice that the child has no say in, and that's why children should be equally important as a spouse, while also understanding that, as adults, they won't receive the same level of importance in return. I asked him what he wants going forward. He said he needs time to process and think about our relationship. I told my wife about our conversation, and let's just say that she's been really upset throughout the entire day. She's been fighting the urge to call my son. I'd like to know if you guys think that OP did the right thing here, or if OP kind of handled this follow-up and this heart-to-heart poorly. Could OP have done better as a father in this sole situation, as harsh as that sounds? The Morningstar commented, "So he told you how awful this was for him and you doubled down? Didn't bother to clarify that you love him and your wife more than anything? Comparing romantic and parental love is apples to oranges, and you never should have said what you said. All you had to say here was, 'Son, I'm so sorry you felt like you weren't a priority. Let me be clear, I love you unconditionally and always will, and I will always be there for you.'" He wanted to know as a child that you loved him, and he still wants to know that, but instead, you confirmed that yes, you do love him less. Why is it even a comparison? And told him his dream of making his children feel more loved than he did was unrealistic, as if no one could possibly do better than you did. No wonder he thinks asking you for support would be a burden. You genuinely don't act like someone who cares about him. Geez, have you considered that you actually might not love your son? Not kidding. Ouch. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy Am I the Jerk Here story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.